from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working to double the degrees produced annually to meet workforce demands and grow West Virginia's economy. Learn more at wvhepc.edu. The W. Page Pitt School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Marshall University, providing hands-on education in advertising, public relations, and journalism across all media platforms.
At the legislature today, members of the House spend hours on the floor debating several pieces of legislation, including a bill that would end funding for the West Virginia Women's Commission. Republican lawmakers are backing a bill that would add protections for employment and housing discrimination to state law. And the House and Senate Majority Leaders join us to discuss that all-important budget bill. Those stories and more coming up on the legislature today. Governor Jim Justice made stops in Fairmont and Elkins today on his Save Our State tour. The tour is his effort to convince the people of West Virginia to back his plan to raise taxes to help close a $497 million budget gap. At his stop at Fairmont State University, Justice criticized lawmakers for being almost halfway into this legislative session and not taking action on his proposals. Lawmakers typically don't approve a budget until the end of the legislative session so they can debate bills that have a fiscal impact first. But even so, my guests tonight are being pressured to share that plan. Delegate Darrell Coles is from Morgan County. He was elected to the chamber in 2006 and serves as the House Majority Leader. Senator Ryan Ferns is the Majority Leader in the Senate. He was elected to the body in 2014 after serving in the House. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start with the budget because, Delegate, there were a couple of members who stood up on the House floor today and said, "What's the plan? When are you going to share it with us?" You responded on the floor this afternoon. What'd you have to say?
I did. We had a good discussion in the House today, but you know, we're working on the budget. The budget process is that it's a process. We need to go through to examine the governor's proposal, but I think it's fair to say in the House we're more interested in tightening the state budget's belt to making sure the state government lives within its means and not being too quick to go to the taxpayer and say we need more of your money to help fund the programs that we have. But at the same time, we can be reasonable, have good state government programs that people need and depend on, but find a way to live within our means.
The governor presented a new budget plan earlier this week that essentially dropped some of the rates of the taxes he initially proposed and added some new ones, like a 1-cent soda tax. I think it's 1 cent per ounce, 50 cents on cigarettes, which you guys approved a bill to increase the cigarette tax last summer as well. Senator, why don't we start with you, because you strongly opposed the governor's initial plan that raised taxes, I think, $450 million. How do you feel about this new proposal?
I think the new proposal is just more of the same. As you mentioned, it's a shifting around of taxes. It tells me that the governor and didn't have confidence in his own first proposed budget. I mean, at this point, he's essentially negotiating with himself. You know, he puts out a budget, he asks the legislature to respond. We go to work on our budget. As you said, no budget's ever been produced prior to the end of the session. That is a goal for us this year, but that's not the normal action of the legislature. But within a couple weeks, he goes out and proposes another budget. It shows that he lacks confidence in his own plan. And the sad part about that is his staff and he himself had been out promoting that first budget, which he now has abandoned himself. So it was a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted taxpayer resources promoting a budget that he himself has now abandoned.
Now, the budget process can be a little bit complex, and I'm no expert. This is only my 5th session, but in the past, what we've seen, at least from Governor Tomlin, is he presents a budget plan. In the past, he did present some tax increases, and those come in the form of a separate piece of legislation. Have either of you seen a piece of legislation from the governor's office yet to increase a tax?
I think some of those bills are introduced.
Have they been introduced?
They haven't seen much action yet, but I think there's been some introduced.
I think some of them have been, but as far as some of the new tax proposals that he's made in his most current budget, I'm not sure if all of those have been introduced. It's a little bit hard to keep up with all the different taxes the governor is proposing. It gets to be a little confusing. I know as legislators it's confusing. I'm sure it is for the public as well.
Delegate, let's talk about the overall plan, though. This 1 cent on the per ounce of soda, the 50 cents on cigarette. It also includes a hike in the sales tax and this tax for businesses. How do you feel about this new plan?
Well, it's a long list. It's a little different from the first plan, but the end result is the same. The solution that the governor is looking for is to go to the taxpayers to raise more money from the taxpayers to try to fund government that's bigger than we can afford right now. So I think in some ways the taxpayers expect us to reduce the size of government first before we come knocking on their door for more money.
Well, the governor has said that he's open to hear any suggestions about where you can make cuts in state government. Delegate, why don't we start with you? Do you have any specific areas that you think there are cuts to be made?
I do. I think there are cuts to be made. There's shifting we can do in state government. Pension smoothing, I think, has been talked about by the governor's office, the Senate, and the House. It may be something we can look at, but there's an opportunity for tax reform to try to collect some revenue up front, whether that's broadening the sales tax base, eliminating some exemptions that we currently provide today. Those are the kind of things we can do to enhance revenue. The governor's introduced $27 million worth of cuts, but anywhere in state government that we think is not returning a good value for the taxpayer, we should take a good solid look at and come up with a list of priority of what the state government should be doing and fund what we can afford.
Senator, do you see any places to make cuts just yet?
Well, that's actually the activity of the Finance Committee in the Senate right now. We've broken into different work groups to break up the various areas of the budget and see where the most savings can be had. I mean, if you look at the budget, you know that we have the DHHR area, we have education, we have lottery, and so the Senate Finance Committee right now has broken into those work groups. I think the House is doing the same, going through there line by line and determining where the most savings can be found, and that is where we'll go to produce our budget.
And it seems that the budget is kind of, because of the Senate's work on the budget, the Senate as a whole seems to be in a holding pattern right now. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect, but the House is having these long floor sessions and debating a lot of bills, and Senate floor sessions this week at least have been very short. Is that what it is?
Well, I don't know that, I haven't seen the House's activity, but I think the work that I'm talking about wouldn't produce bills necessarily. I mean, there's certain areas of the budget that would be reduced that wouldn't require legislation. And so that work is being done in those work groups within the Finance Committee, and that type of work wouldn't be seen on the Senate floor.
So both the House and Senate Finance Chairmen joined me in the first week of our program, and they both said by 30 days they want to have a spending plan to present to both chambers. 30 days, I think we hit next Thursday. Delegate, is that the mission of the leadership? Are we going to see something at day 30? Yeah,
I think that's fair. I think we're about on schedule for some sort of framework or spending plan or direction of where the budget is and how it's taking shape. I expect we're close to that, if not right on 30 days.
And in the work in the Senate Finance Committee, are we close enough to the 30-day mark to get it done?
I agree. I agree with what the Majority Leader in the House said. I think that the governor suggesting that he's put this clock out there and that the legislature is falling behind. As I mentioned before, no legislature has ever produced a budget prior to the end of session, but I do think that this legislature is on track to make that historic mark and produce a budget well in advance of the completion of the session.
Well, I'd like to talk to you both about some of your other priorities this session. And Delegate, why don't we start with you, because education is a big one for you. What would you like to see come out of the House this session in terms of education reform?
Well, it is, and it's getting a lot of notice in the House right now. And some of the debate we've had on the floor has been over some education bills. But I think the idea of education reform is about empowering local school systems and local schools and local teachers and principals to have charge of their school. Those are the concepts of the things we're seeing, but it also transitions to higher education. We'd like to move more control from the central government down to the institutions themselves to make more decisions. And and actually, as it relates to the budget, use money more efficiently and effectively for what they see they need to do.
Well, the education chairman also on this show earlier this session, and that was one thing that they stressed is there's a potential for an impact to local funding because of the budget crisis that we're in, but in turn will give you flexibility. Senator, should people at home be worried about the state school aid formula, about the amount of money each county receives per child to fund education?
I don't think there should be concern or worry about the school aid formula. I do think that, as Daryl said, with increased flexibility, I think there's potential for savings. And I think that's very much something the Senate's been looking at as well, both in higher education and public education. Tell us what type of flexibility would allow you to operate more efficiently so that we can realize those savings in the budget.
Okay. Delegate Daryl Coles and Senator Ryan Ferns, the majority leaders in both the House and the Senate. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
We meet 3 more members of the West Virginia Legislature tonight on this edition of Meet Your Lawmakers.
Richard Ojeda is a Democrat from Logan County. He is a first-term senator elected in 2016. Ojeda represents the 7th Senatorial District. He is a 2-time Bronze Star recipient and has received several other awards for his 24 years of military service. Ojeda retired as an officer in the U.S. Army in 2013. Jeff Elridge represents the state's 22nd House of Delegates district. He was appointed to the seat for 1 term in 2004 and 1 election in 2012. A Democrat, he is from Lincoln County. Eldridge is a graduate of Marshall University and volunteers as a youth basketball coach. Zach Maynard is a first-term delegate from Lincoln County. He was elected in 2016 to represent the state's 22nd House of Delegates district. A Republican, Maynard is 24 years old and a graduate of the West Virginia Institute of Technology. He works as a substitute teacher.
The legislature has a roughly $500 million budget gap to fill for the next fiscal year, and both delegates and senators are looking for areas to cut state government in order to save money. In the House today, members voted on a bill that would put roughly $150,000 back into the general revenue budget. Liz McCormick joins us with more.
The West Virginia Women's Commission was the subject of debate in the House today. It's a small program under the State Department of Health and Human Resources that advocates, educates, and promotes women's issues in West Virginia. A group of Republican women in the House say the services the commission provides are duplicative, and that's why they are backing a bill to get rid of it. The House also passed. The Virginia Women's Commission was created in 1977 with the task of promoting women's issues in a variety of ways in the state. They advocate at the legislature for the passage of certain bills, and they also encourage women to run for political offices by holding recruiting and training events. A number of women in the House of Delegates, though, believe that the commission is inefficient, and they point to several state audits of the program. That's why several of them, including Delegate Kayla Kessinger, introduced House Bill 2646 this year. The bill would end the state funding of the West Virginia Women's Commission, which receives about $150,000 in general revenue dollars. As the bill's lead sponsor, Kessinger spoke in favor of the bill today.
Helen Holt became the first female Secretary of State in West Virginia in 1957. Pearl S. Buck received a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1938. Minnie Buckingham became the first African-American woman to serve in any state legislature in West Virginia in 1928. Katherine Johnson worked for NASA, overcame racism and sexism, and put a man on the moon in the 1960s. These women were able to accomplish and achieve their goals and successes without the existence of the Women's Commission. To assert that women need a commission to run for office or to be successful undermines women and does nothing to empower us as a demographic in our nation and in our state.
Republican Delegate Amy Summers is also a sponsor of the bill. She says the commission has been ineffective in her view because they never approached her to discuss legislation, one of the commission's advocacy roles.
One of the goals of the Women's Commission is to advance the economic status, health, safety, education, leadership, and advocacy for West Virginia state women. I would say that they have failed in their mission. Another goal is for them to develop recommendations about and for legislation affecting women. The 3 years I've been here, I've never been approached. I can't even tell you who's on the Women's Commission.
Male and female members of the House alike stood to oppose the bill, though, and keep the Women's Commission alive, like Delegate Linda Longstreth, who is one of only 2 female Democratic members of the chamber. Longstreth says while other state agencies might address some of the similar problems as the Women's Commission, the commission is the only agency focused on women alone.
I heard what the vice chair said, and she said that it can be distributed around so many other agencies. Okay, it can. But those other agencies have other things on their plates, which means they cannot specifically just focus in on women. And women are important. You know, we're 51% in this state. I think we are the majority. We may not look like the majority in this House, but we're still the majority in this state.
Delegate Justin Markham, a Democrat from Mingo County, spoke against the bill. He pointed out the commission does more than just encourage women to run for legislative office.
To eliminate something that's about $150,000 for all of the stuff they do, it's crazy to eliminate something along those lines. And the severity of the financial situation was mentioned. And I think we need to slow down and realize here, if it was so severe that this bill was going to wave a magic wand and save the state of West Virginia from its financial problems, this bill would be in finance. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. This bill never went to finance. It was fast-tracked through this system, and it's all political gesturing.
After more than an hour of debate, House Bill 2646 was approved in the chamber on a vote of 58 to 41. It now heads to the Senate for consideration.
The House also passed 2 substance abuse-related bills today. One bill increases the penalties for trafficking fentanyl, a pain medication that was responsible for several overdoses in the Huntington area last year. The second bill establishes the West Virginia Drug Overdose Monitoring Act. It would create a central database of overdose information in the state. Both bills are now moved to the Senate.
Today was Civil Rights Lobbying Day at the State House, a lobbying event that included organizations like the NAACP, West Virginia Free, and Fairness West Virginia, all groups that work to end discrimination in the state. The groups are backing several pieces of legislation this year, but one bill in particular, one that's been tried and has failed in the past, is receiving bipartisan support. Samantha Godby reports.
What do you think of when you hear discrimination? Black Lives Matter? LGBT rights? Do you think of someone who used to look at you funny? A childhood bully? Everyone has something they think of when they hear the word discrimination. Joseph Cohen, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of West Virginia, says that's because discrimination touches everyone.
I think most of us have been bullied at one time in our lives. Most of us have been on the receiving end of mistreatment. But if you're treated that way because of who you are and not the content of your character, it's simply unjust.
In fact, Cohen says the discrimination his family faced is what made him passionate about the issue.
My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. So, we've seen in my family, on a very close personal level, what hatred can be.
A group fighting discrimination in West Virginia flooded the Capitol lobbies and lawmakers' offices with constituents today, all rallying support for several pieces of legislation. They include a bill that has been considered several times at the State House over the past few years.
House Bill 2670 would add sexual orientation to West Virginia's non-discrimination laws. Although legislation like this has popped up the last several sessions, Delegate Charlotte Lane is among the first Republicans to be a lead sponsor of the bill.
Lane is a newly elected Republican member of the House of Delegates, and her support of the legislation and the support of her fellow Republicans is what makes the Employment and Housing Non-Discrimination Act different this year.
We've got a lot of new people, a lot of younger people, and the thought of discrimination to them, they can't even fathom why people would be opposed to a non-discrimination bill.
All kinds are welcome here.
Executive Director of Fairness West Virginia, Andrew Schneider, says the same sentiment is being shared with him as he travels the state, drumming up support for local ordinances that offer the same discrimination protections to West Virginia citizens.
We've demonstrated that more communities in West Virginia want to protect all of their citizens from non-discrimination. A record 5 towns and cities in West Virginia passed LGBT non-discrimination ordinances.
But at the State House, Republican leaders have said over the past several years the bill was not a priority. Much of their time has been spent dealing with a massive budget deficit. But this year, Schneider says the bipartisan support of the bill gives him hope for its success.
When Republicans and Democrats alike were considering whether they would be sponsors of this bill, many of them said, I have a gay family member, I have a lesbian friend, I have a bisexual coworker, I know someone who's transgender. It was that face that they could apply to this issue. It was no longer abstract.
Lane likens the shift in thinking about the non-discrimination bill to that of the women's suffrage movement that resulted in a constitutional amendment in 1920, giving women the right to vote. Over time, Lane says, people's opinions can be shifted.
People have had a chance to think about it, and they've come to realize that we are all people and we all have feelings and we should be treating everybody equally.
House Bill 2670 currently awaits discussion in the House Judiciary Committee and has gained quite a bit of bipartisan support, with a total of 33 sponsors on both sides of the aisle. For the Legislature Today, I'm Samantha Godby at the State House.
The West Virginia Capitol building was dedicated on the state's 69th birthday in 1932. The 8-year construction project, designed by Cass Gilbert, cost just under $10 million. Today, thousands flock to the building each year to learn about the state's history. And tonight, we meet one of the people responsible for sharing the building's story, Mary Ann Long.
My name is Mary Ann Long, and I'm the tour guide supervisor here at the Capitol. I am the hostess of the Capitol. When folks come in to go around our Capitol and look around, I'm the one that shows them around. There's several days I've walked 13 to 20 miles here in the Capitol just doing tours. But it's fun. It's fun. We do have a standard tour. We start down in the rotunda. We tell them some history on the Capitol, look up at the big old chandelier, and then we come upstairs and we do the Senate and the House foyer and into the Senate chambers. When we come into the chambers, we tell them about how many senators and how many delegates there are, of course. We tell them where the news media sits. We talk about the chandelier, the columned lights, the desk that are the original desks to the Capitol. They're made of black walnut, which is found right here in our beautiful West Virginia mountains. We tell them how long they're in the process. They're in for 60 days, for instance, and a lot of times some of the delegates and senators will come out and talk to our children, which they love.
This gentleman is Robert C. Byrd.
My favorite story is Senator Byrd. When I first started here, I always made a joke about Senator Byrd that he's so life-size of his statue, it fits his personality. Well, I had said that, and there was a lady from a different state came in, and she kind of got huffied up. She says, well, I don't think that's funny. And I'd only been here like 2 or 3 days, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, you know. But he is bigger than life for us. I mean, if you look around West Virginia, the things he has done for West Virginia, he is, to the West Virginians, he is bigger than life. Well, I think it's important, again, because we are the hostess. We tell people all about West Virginia. It's just not the Capitol. And plus, this is a beautiful building. People need to know the history of West Virginia. That's my job, to tell people the history of West Virginia and what a great state this is.
Tomorrow on our show, we recap the legislative events of the week with 2 members of the Capitol Press Corps. Ann Eli, managing editor of the State Journal, joins us, along with Brad McElhaney, statewide correspondent for West Virginia Metro News. And remember, the West Virginia channel is your daily source for live legislative coverage. Tune in at 11 a.m. to watch the House and Senate floor sessions, or catch them as they're rebroadcast each evening at 7. Those are also available streaming online at wvpublic.org. This has been the Legislature Today. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working to double the degrees produced annually to meet workforce demands and grow West Virginia's economy. Learn more at wvhepc.edu. The W. Page Pitt School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Marshall University, providing hands-on education in advertising, public relations, and journalism across all media platforms. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting,